I've had many people sit me down and say, why do you want to make these films? Who wants to watch these films? Who wants to pay 200 rupees to get their head fucked for them? So I've had really sensible people discourage me from making the kind of films I want to make.
Hi, Devashish. Hello.
Hi. Who's this?
Yeah, this is Satyam Mishra.
Satyam Mishra. Hi, Satyam.
Yeah. So I have just two questions. Initially, when you were dabbling into different careers and you were into a very good, mainstream film studio, what brought this change? Was it because of the rejection there? Was there this inheritance voice there, or do you found out later?
Like I said earlier, I mean, your choices are really a sequence of accidents and a sequence of things not working out, circumstances. So after Bunty or Bubbly, I was the chief AD on that film. So I had a really good rapport with Jaideep Sahni, who had written Bunty or Bubbly, and he was like the creative head at Yash Raj around that time. And he and Aditya Chopra asked me if I want to make something with them, if I want to write something. I said sure, because I was still trying to figure out what to do next, and nobody had ever asked me to write a film. So I started writing, and then they asked me if I direct it. And then they had a tie-up with Disney for 2 films. That's the first time Disney actually was trying to enter India. This was in 2005, 2006. And the first film they made was a really bad film called Roadside Romeo. And mine was the second animation film. So mine then was a really big film with about 8 of the top stars of that time. It was an ensemble cast. It was a story of a jungle, almost like Lion King. It was that scale of animation. But Roadside, so I was in production for 3.5 years, because 3D animation takes time. Like, to give you a context, a film like Finding Nemo took 7 years of animation to make. So I was 3.5 years into that process. Our 3D animation models were ready. I was supposed to enter the stage called Animatics when Disney and Yash Raj broke their tie-up, because Roadside Romeo was Yash Raj's biggest flop in all those years, and Disney's first flop in all their career. No one had ever delivered a flop. So they broke the tie-up, and my film got shelved. And I had no concept of a film getting shelved. That too after 3.5 years of work. So I told Jaideep that I had a 3-film deal. I told him I can't come to terms with the fact that you just took away 3.5 years of my life. So give me some time. I need to think about what I want to do next. And that year, so for the few years that I was working with Yash Raj, I was also trying very hard to understand the political climate of our country. And around that time, there was a lot of volatile things happening in the Adivasi belt of Chhattisgarh, Orissa, and Andhra. Not that anything has changed; it's probably worse now. But I was only reading about it in the papers, and I wanted to know more. So I undertook a trip because I was so lost. I didn't know what to do next. I went and spent about 5 weeks in the jungles there, traveling, meeting people, trying to understand the Adivasis' issues. And I never came back. I just stayed there. So I could never go back to Yash Raj. I walked away from a 3-film deal, and I decided to tell these stories for the rest of my life. It was just an accident. If the film hadn't gotten shelved, I would be making Yash Raj films for the rest of my life, maybe. I don't know.
And the second question is, what would you say to these filmmakers like Q, who started back in Kolkata, literally forming their teams and having, making local films, and many filmmakers like those who are still there, whose films go into the festivals. And they, lately they have been 2-3 platforms which have been releasing, but they actually are not widely recognized, even in the film circuit in Bombay. What would your advice would be for a young indie filmmaker to break it, like who is taking that kind of a path?
No, I firstly, don't get me wrong, I don't like giving advice. Everyone should think about what they want from that journey. Like you mentioned Q, and Q is a very dear friend, and I admire him for how he has stayed in that zone of his consistently for over 15 years.
Yeah.
And he doesn't seek anything outside of that. Whatever validation he gets for the art he creates from the people that he gets it from, it gives him enough energy and power and fuel to keep making the kind of films he wants to make. So he doesn't want to operate outside of that, and he finds a lot of satisfaction there. But there are a lot of people inspired by Q who make those kinds of films, and then they feel like, they're not being recognized enough. But then they forget that they got inspired by Q, who is happy with what he gets. So you need to answer for yourself that what are you seeking from the films that you make? Which kind of audiences are you making them for? What kind of acclaim or what kind of or reward or what kind of validation will satisfy you? And you need to choose your path accordingly. There are a lot of filmmakers, unlike you, at the other end of the spectrum, who are my peers. We started out together and they chose to go down a studio path. I'll give you an example. There's a filmmaker called Rajkumar Gupta. We both
Yeah.
assisted on Black Friday together. But he chose to go down the studio path, made a No One Killed Jessica, made a Raid, and he gets a lot of satisfaction doing that. So how is he less valid than a Q, or how is Q less valid than Rajkumar Gupta? They're both equally valid, but they both chose very different paths because they seeked very different things from making of films. So everyone needs to answer this question for themselves.
But I'm just closing it up. What I found, like, in the critiquing circles, or especially film circuits, film festivals, more to say, in indie films there are it is like, it has been just a small observation where films who follow a certain narrative or have things to say which are mainly disturbing into a larger discourse are given more validation over small films. But there are exceptions like Village Rockstars and all, but those are less. There are more garbage, there are more Ajji, there is more Bhosle, but less of those films. What have you got to say about it?
Not really, man, because if you mentioned Ajji, now Ajji didn't do even 1/10 of the kind of critical acclaim that Newton and Masan did. And Newton and Masan are fairly more accessible. They are fairly lighter. They both end on a very life-affirming note. So I don't even agree with what you said for me to have a take on that. I think out there are enough films that are, in fact, so much so that even Busan, which is South Korea, and South Korea is known for its dark cinema. If you see the films that have won there's a section called New Currents for new upcoming filmmakers, first or second time filmmakers. And in the past, in the 90s, a lot of winners of New Currents were the really dark films. But in the last 10 years, not a single dark film has won an award there. They're all more positive films sending out a message of life affirmation. So it's actually just the opposite. Filmmakers like me are now getting even less critical acclaim than I would have if I had made my films 10 years ago. So it's all phases, man. If the world is getting fucked right now with fascists in every country, even film festivals want a little hope. But the minute the world sort of achieves some stability, film festivals will want to reward darkness again. These are all cycles. There's no point trying to look for reasons or patterns in these things. Everything is the way it is. So you just make the films you want to make. Whether they don't get recognized now, they'll get recognized 10 years later. They don't recognize when you're alive. I have prepared myself for recognition once I die, like Ritik Ghatak did. So it's not in your hands. The only thing that's in your hands is the films you want to make. That's all we should focus on.
Hi, sir. First of all, love your work, sir. Big fan.
Thank you.
So I had a question regarding your writing process, sir, when you are selecting a particular subject, like for example, Bhosle. So I'm Trivedi in Maharashtra. So I quite associated to it a little bit in bits and pieces as well. So, sir, what is your process of writing when it comes to research of a particular subject? And so also, how much do you think when you're talking about festivals, how much do these festivals actually help you get monetary returns, like culmination? Because, many a times we see that people go to a film looking at a banner that's been selected by Cannes or suppose a particular festival. If you could just help me with that.
So monetary returns are a very tricky, parameter when you talk about festivals. A lot of my producers have struggled the most with the whole festival circuit because it's a money suck. They have to pay for first submissions, then they pay for different DCPs that they have to make for different regions. Then they pay for if half the festivals don't even pay for people outside of the director to travel. Now, in the last 2-3 years, even before COVID hit, even a festival like Cannes was having a financial crunch. They had to turn to a company like HP to sponsor the festival. So they would either pay for your coming and going or they pay for your hotel. So a producer then ends up paying for 2-3 people to come and go, to stay. So it's an endless drain of money on producers. Festivals don't really help you make any money back. unless in that rare case, like a Masan that had a French co-producer. So because they had a French co-producer, the French sales agents picked it up for distribution in those markets. And even if they got distributed in those markets, the first people being paid out were those sales agents, those theater owners, those distributors, those co-producers. Then that little bit of money, if at all, came to the Indian producers. So you do it for acclaim, you do it to get recognized, you actually don't do it for money. You only end up spending money. That said, a film like Ajji or Bhosle, if I didn't do festivals, who in this country would have even heard of them? We would put out, like when Ajji released, it released in the halls. I don't know how many people even know that it released in the halls for a week. On a day that had its maximum occupancy, there were 7 people in the hall. That was the maximum occupancy Ajji got. 7 people in a hall in Andheri. There were halls in Calcutta that cancelled shows because not a single ticket sold. Because we didn't have the money to put up a hoarding outside in the hall. We didn't have money to print standees. There was one ad in the Times of India, a small ad about 2 inches by 2 inches that came out on a Friday. So you don't know how to get people to even be aware of your film until you do festivals. Like Bhosle, people had some idea of a film that existed called Bhosle because we did 1.5 years of festivals. So we look at that, if nothing else, we look at that as some sort of marketing. It's some sort of publicity and advertising for a film that cannot afford publicity and advertising. Because there's no other way for us to find audiences for these films. So primarily my agenda to take my films to festivals is to get those reviews, to get that acclaim, to get that little bit of social media buzz over 1 year, 1.5 years, so that there is a small set of audience that starts expanding because word is getting out. So that when you're ready to put it out there, at least that small set of people will watch it. I forgot the first part of your question. What was that?
So first part was about the research of how do you go about, like for example, Bhosle or Ajji.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, my initial impulse to tell a story is what socio-politics do I want to talk about? What is going to allow me to take a stance through my film? And the choice of the character, the choice of the world, the choice of that backdrop all comes with the choice of the politics I want to talk about. So with Bhosle, although it was a lot more personal than the politics of Ajji, when I was researching Black Friday, and I've said this in a lot of interviews, this was around 2003 when the MNS kind of politics was at its peak, and signboards were being taken down and turned into Marathi. So Hindi signboards weren't allowed. You had to have Marathi signboards. So I was walking around like I'm walking in an alien country. I couldn't read signboards. I couldn't talk to a single government employee without being made to feel like I don't belong. So when I was researching Black Friday, I was trying to talk to cops. I'd walk into police stations to have conversations. I'd talk in Hindi and they'd answer in Marathi. Nobody answered in Hindi because they were instructed to. And that being forced to feel like you don't belong is very violent. I was feeling like they're inflicting violence on me. And they don't have the constitutional right to, because I have the constitutional right to reside in any part of the country. So it was personal. So by default with Bhosle, the research was straight out of my life. And at least the ideological research. And then the rest of it follows. So it's primarily what am I trying to talk about? And then like with Ajji, we wanted to talk about gender, my co-writer Mirat and I. So we undertook that effort to reach out to lawyers who work with, pro bono lawyers who work with such cases. We researched the POCSO Act, which is an act that now ensures that if a minor so much as points a finger that this man raped me, they will not even question the minor, they will first put that man in jail. So we researched the antecedents of the POCSO Act. We spoke to dozens of survivors and families of survivors. So first we decided we want to tell a story around gender. Then we undertake the research to ensure that we are equipped enough to not be inauthentic. We have Rajat in the house.
So my question was like, this happens to me with many times. Like, for whom do we make the art? Like films in our case, like if we make for ourselves or for the audience? What should be the take of the director and the decisions he makes during the process of the craft of the film?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's a very difficult question. It's probably one of the most difficult questions that I have grappled with in my filmmaking life. Although when you're trying to make a film that is driven by your artistic impulse, like I obviously I don't work backwards from an audience like a Yashraj film does. कि audience को ये चाहिए, audience को 5 गाने चाहिए, तो हम film को ऐसे लिखेंगे, ऐसे बनाएंगे. So I'm not working backwards from an audience because I don't even know what that audience is, how to identify the target audience. So I'm primarily working from an artistic impulse. So now I know I sound like a school teacher here, so bear with me because I've thought about this so often that I've found a way to simplify it for myself. So an artistic impulse, it works in a forward thrust from you towards the universe. But an audience expectation works in a backward thrust from the universe towards you. So a Yashraj film, like the best Yashraj film, say a DDLJ. Now Aditya Chopra made that with a lot of heart and a lot of passion. I haven't met anyone who's not liked DDLJ. You may not really enjoy that form of filmmaking, but you can't deny the fact that there's something very original about DDLJ in 1995. So I really envy an Aditya Chopra for DDLJ because in that forward thrust of an artistic impulse and a backward thrust of audience expectation, there's a perfect overlap. What he wants to put out is what the audience wants to consume. But with a film like Bhosle, that overlap starts to diminish. And what I'm trying to put out is not what the audience is seeking. Therefore, it becomes a big part of my job to not only try and think about where does that audience lie, but also to cultivate an audience. Because essentially, when I think of a film like Bhosle, I have to assume that the audience for that film is zero. There is nobody sitting out there who's waiting for Bhosle. But there are people sitting out there waiting to watch the next Dharma or next Yashraj film or the next Christopher Nolan film. So when my audience set to start with is zero, I have to then, I'll give you an example of this filmmaker called Fateh Akin. I don't know if you've heard of Fateh Akin. He's won at Cannes, he's won at Berlin. He's a German filmmaker. And he's one of the more celebrated independent artistic voices on the festival circuit. So he is also an underground DJ musician. So in all the time that he's not making films, he's creating music in all these subaltern music spaces. And he's got a huge following for his music work. So all those people who follow his music, when he makes a film, they by default become the audiences of his films. So when people ask him that, why are you so active on the music scene? He says, I'm only trying to make an audience for my cinema because I don't know who I'm making my cinema for. I know I'm making it primarily for my artistic impulse, but if I don't have an audience, nobody's going to give me money to keep making my film. So it's that constant push and pull between my forward thrust of my artistic impulse and trying to find that those people, they might be 100, they might be 1,000, they might be 50,000, I don't know. But I have to actively work at engaging. Like this conversation that I'm having with all of y'all is also me trying to engage with people and try to see, are there people out there who are watching my films? Who are these people? And are these people going to watch my future films? So it's also an exercise on my behalf to try and understand y'all. So it's not just me trying to answer your questions. That's why I want to see your faces when I talk to you. So I think an independent filmmaker, an artistic filmmaker, a part of their job is also to actively cultivate an audience. Like for example, Ritik Ghatak. Ritik Ghatak was very actively a teacher at FTI for many years. He was the dean at FTI for 2 or 3 years. So he was actively engaging with film students, engaging with young creators of cinema who would then take the legacy of his films forward. Because we can't operate in vacuums. So it's an ongoing process. I still struggle. If someone asks me, who's your target audience? I say, fuck knows, man. I think the people who watch Tandav are not the same people who watch an Ajji. They're primarily two different sets of people. So I don't know, but I actively try and see and seek out people and try and understand who are these people who are watching my films. How can this group be expanded? How can we together keep having dialogue around my films?
Sir, one more question. Like, there are a lot of patterns like this, which goes inside us in terms of our thoughts regarding which may many times discourage us from doing the art or making the film. So it may be in any kind of questions which may not be specific to a certain thing, but it totally discourages us from doing anything further. So how do we overcome that in such a field and in terms of art and film?
See, like I said, I had 16 shelf films over 10 years. So I have also reached that point many times where I felt discouraged, where I felt that there's no point making these films. So what I rely on is what Vrushab actually has called this session. I rely on the multiple arts that I dabble in to keep my spirit from dying. So in those years that my films weren't getting made and I had 16 shelf films, in that period of 8 years, I had a book of short stories get published with HarperCollins called Forgetting. I wrote 2 children's books with a publishing house called Tulika, and surprisingly, both those books were bestsellers and they're in the CBSE syllabus. And till today, 1 month of my rent every year comes from the sale of those 2 children's books. In 2008, I did a solo show of my graphic art. I keep doing poetry readings of my poetry. So all of that keeps me going. So if I had put all my eggs in the cinema basket, I might have probably committed suicide by now. Because you face so much discouragement. Forget rejection. Rejection is the later stage. People will discourage you from following your artistic impulse. I've had many people sit me down and say, why do you want to make these films? Who wants to watch these films? Who wants to pay 200 rupees to get their head fucked for them? So I've had really sensible people discourage me from making the kind of films I want to make. So these other forms of expression have kept me going. So when one door shuts, I try and open another one. And then I come back to this door and I continue knocking again. So that energizes me. All the filmmakers I talk about, from Fateh Akin to Q. Q has a band, Gandu Circus. And in all the times that his films are not getting made, he's bagging out rap music and doing live gigs. So that keeps his energy flowing. That keeps him from self-destructing. So the advantage of cinema is that I think all of us here who want to make films or are making films, I think all of you all have more than one passion. Either you all are into writing and art, or writing and music, or music and art. Keep following it all. Don't pin your hopes on cinema alone.
Almost 40% of your film in Bhosle is like you let it go. Let us see what will happen. Like improvisation was there.
Sure.
You thought
Improvisation is a very dangerous word. So when I'm not going to the script, I spend a lot of time in rehearsals and playing out the scenes at location with the actors even before shoot. I don't allow improvisations. So people actually mistake a lot of being open to the energies that a location and collaborators and actors bring. They mistake that for improvisation. But I don't allow improvisation. I allow departure from the script, but in a very methodical and controlled manner. I'm not doing that on shoot. I'm doing that in pre-production. I do like 10 days of workshops in these rehearsal spaces where we create the dimensions of the final shooting space, and I play out the scenes for the actors and the DOP, the sound designer, the art director, and we play it out again and again and again to see that which newer spaces can we take these ideas into. Is this more powerful than what I had written? Then I take my actors to locations while we are doing the art direction and setting up the location. While we are pre-lighting, I am playing out the scenes with the actors to see how that space is changing my scene. But once I arrive on shoot, no improvisations allowed. Then what we've decided in prep is what we play out to the T. So yes, I have departed from the script, but I haven't really improvised. I have, like I said, it's not a script, it's a scenario. So I have also left room on paper for these elements to inform what is on paper. So it shouldn't be seen as improvisation as much as that is really the filmmaking process. The shoot is really one small part of that filmmaking process.
Yeah. So you do believe a lot of things change on edit?
Of course. They change in prep, then they change a lot on edit. Because again, for example, one of the days we were shooting in November, mostly, and in November, Bombay has never seen rain. And 2 days in November, almost in the first phase of winter, it started raining. And I don't have the kind of luxury of time and resources to call off a shoot and come back the next day. So my shot taking changed to not bring the rain into the frame, because if I incorporated the rain, then the next day for continuity, I'll have to bring a rain machine to match that rain. The minute I changed the shot taking of that 1 day of shoot, there's a domino effect on all the remaining scenes because my grammar started changing. The minute my grammar started changing, my cut point started changing. My cut point started changing, the way the characters would inhabit those frames started changing. And then my film started changing. And when I sit with that footage, I cannot go back to the script because that script, not just the script, but the where we arrived in rehearsals was a film that I have now departed from because of those 2 days of rain. Now I have to let the non-edited footage talk to me, and the footage has to tell me what the footage wants to be. So I start, like Tarkovsky said, I start sculpting in time for the third time. You're sculpting in time at the scenario stage. Then when your collaborators come in prep and shoot, you're sculpting in time for the second time. And then that footage, which you didn't imagine when you were writing the scenario, you're sculpting in time for the third time. And if you don't allow for that, the film starts smelling inauthentic. And the lesser films, you can actually tell that the filmmaker has tried to force certain ideas on the actors and the spaces and the frame, knowing that the space is actually not allowing for that. But they had this in their mind when they were writing it, so they're forcing it. And it starts smelling inauthentic. You can't tell why, but it feels wrong. So I allow the footage to talk to me, and I allow for that to happen.
So what is that binding thing that or like usually like some people to call it as theme key, this is my theme, that may change but theme should not change, or this is fixed for me. So what is that thing that you fix even if it goes not goes as you planned, but this is the thing that is fixed for me and this I'll try to get it somehow? Like, what is that?
So yes, it's a good question. So like I said, in all that time that I take to prep, so I had shoot my films in record time. Ajji was shot start to finish in 18 days. Bhosle was shot start to finish in 25 days. So because I don't have the liberty of time and resources on shoot, I take a lot of time to prep. So when I'm prepping, what I'm doing with all my collaborators, not just my DOP. So when I'm finding, say for example, the shot taking grammar. Now the grammar of the cinematography of Ajji has commonalities with Bhosle, but they're also radically different. There's a different kind of grammar that both these films have. Now we took a lot of time with the actors and the art director, all of us together, to find how that performer and that character should inhabit the frame. Now that grammar, when I'm saying grammar, I don't mean the exact shot that, इस shot में lens यही होगा और हम कैमरा को ऐसे ही पकड़ेंगे, थोड़ा टॉपिश होगा और वो चेंज नहीं होगा. I'm not saying that. I'm saying an overall grammar for the film. If there's a certain kind of handheld, like in Bhosle, the handheld moves at the pace of the character. So if Bhosle is moving slowly, the camera moves as slowly. If Vilas is moving fast, so Vilas's tracks were shot on a Canon, were shot on a Sony A7S. It's a small camera. But Bhosle was shot on an Alexa Mini. So a heavier camera gave me the slowness in the handheld that Bhosle in that small space requires. But a Sony A7S gave me that lightness and that very urgent, agitated motion that a Vilas in a moving taxi requires. So that grammar is something that cannot change once we've arrived on shoot. But if the shot from a frontal angle is not working, I'm happy to take it to the side. I don't care, as long as the authenticity is not getting compromised. But once we have arrived at that grammar for me is everything. That's the Bible of the film. The actor to the costume designer to the junior artist in far away in the frame has to be then part of that larger grammar that we have arrived at. That is sacrosanct, because that will then give me that one thing that holds the film together. Because on edit also, I'm going to end up finding a different film. I can't allow that film to be so all over the place that nothing is holding it together. So that grammar is something we all collectively arrive at, and that is a code that I don't allow anyone to break.
Hi, sir.
Hi.
Sir, this is Sharath I'm from Andhra Pradesh.
Right, sure.
I'm happy that I found you here in White Road Trails. I haven't seen you or your films earlier, but lucky that I found your voice so related to my thinking, because I'm also an engineer, and I prepared civil services for 2 years, and I know some of the politics. As you are speaking, I connected to them, like the real stuff outside on that authenticity. Like from the 6 months back, I thought of choosing this as my career for various reasons. From the past 6 months, I'm on it. Like I am learning the world cinema. I'm reading books. I'm watching films. So I want to know how you went about it. Like you were on it for 10 or 12 years, as you said earlier. So as a student of filmmaking, how you went about it in those years?
No, like I also said earlier, I've said it in this conversation that I was not a film buff. I was not into cinema till I decided to make cinema. And once you say you decide to cook, then you have to learn cooking. If you decide to make pots, you have to then learn pottery. So I decided then, yes, I have to understand this medium before I attempt to make it. So just started watching films and I've said this earlier in this conversation. I don't know if you were there in the first part of this conversation. Yeah, so I sort of my film school was all my favorite films. I have experienced them 3 times. I first watched them normally, and then I watched them with the audio off, and then I sort of listened to the film, the entire film, with my eyes shut. That has taught me about films more than any film school could have. You sort of understand every decision that the filmmaker and all his or her collaborators would have made at every step just by shutting one of the two, the audio or the video, off. Then you understand how the two together are creating the impact that that film is creating. Just if you can just separate audio and video and understand those choices that every one of your favorite filmmakers have made, that's enough film school. You will know how to make your choices.
Through these festivals, your film have found a lot of audience. Are you involved in the festival strategy, or are you just getting a sales agent or festival strategist, or how much are you involved in this festival? And one more question to that: because even in festivals, it's my observation, even in festivals also there's certain kind of narrative or a certain kind of theme that the films are that the festivals are also looking for. So has that influenced somewhere in your film style of making your film?
But to answer the first part of your question, again, it's a Pandora's box that you opened. Not every Indian film can afford a sales agent because they don't do pro bono work. You have to pay them, and sales agents cost a lot. So in India, because that ecosystem, that culture of making films for the festival circuit does not exist. It is an idea that came from Europe. It is not even an American idea. Although cinema is an American idea to some extent, that ecosystem of artistic cinema and the art house cinema, because the art house, really the word comes from those smaller cinema halls that were created only for artistic cinema. Niche halls, niche cinema, niche sales agents, niche distributors, niche theater owners, niche filmmakers. So they looked at those filmmakers, they used the word auteurs, who are artists in their own right. Now these things, these labels and this structure works in Europe, applies to European cinema, is financially viable in Europe because all the European countries, their governments subsidize those films, fund those films, they put aside funds for the financing of such art like they do with music and painting and literature. Now that ecosystem is a European ecosystem. Sitting in India, suddenly many years back, we realized with artists like Ray and people that Ray spawned that we want to be screened in this ecosystem. We probably want to win awards in this ecosystem. So we started sending our films there. So we don't have that framework here to support the kind of cinema that will win awards or will get distributed or will get sales agents in that ecosystem. So that push and pull has existed since 1955 till 2020 because we don't have that framework. We always talk of wanting to win awards there, wanting to send our films there, wanting to get a critical acclaim, but our government refuses to fund these films. It refuses to subsidize or support us in any way. So if you even put the government aside, if independent financiers want to put money in films, so all of my films to date have been funded by private capital, by 3 or 4 or 5 entities who are patrons of art, who want to put money and then forget that they put money and not expect any returns back. Now, when you put private equity, Europe refuses to have anything to do with films like that because all their equity, all the financing is government funding. And they don't know how to do paperwork for private equity from India. And until 10 years back, all private equity in India was black money. It was underworld money. It was dirty real estate money. It was money that people didn't want to pay taxes on. And here I'm putting all this on the table, calling a spade a spade. So you understand the difference between what filmmakers like me want to do and what the European system expects us to do. So we can't operate in the ecosystem that Europe expects us to operate in. So every few years, you have this one flash in the pan film, like you have one court suddenly, or you have one village rock stars, or you have, one Shaji Karun who goes to festivals 4 or 5 times. You don't have 40 filmmakers a year like you do in a Korea, because Korea supports artistic cinema. You don't have 100 artistic filmmakers a year like you do in France. So why do we not have so many artistic voices? Is because we don't have that ecosystem. So when you say that, does a filmmaker, is he involved in the festival strategy? Yes, nobody else does it. I have to do everything. I have to lead the producer in, I have to advise them in where I think this film should be premiered, hopefully, if we get lucky, what the festival plan for those 1.5 years should look like. And 9 out of 10 times, the plan that I want is not the plan that I get, because we are up against too many odds. We might want a Berlin premiere, but does Berlin want our film? We don't know. So Berlin might reject our film. Do you know that Court, before Venice picked it up, was rejected almost 20 times? They sat on that film for a year before finally Venice said, this film is a piece of fucking art, and it gave it 2 awards, and then suddenly the world opened up. But for almost a year before that, the world was rejecting Court, because there isn't an ecosystem around such cinema for us to make a film knowing that, it will have a premiere in so-and-so festival, then it will go here, then it will go here. This will be its Asian premiere, this will be its North American premiere, this will be its Australian premiere. All these things matter for that particular run to be a satisfactory run. So we've not been able to crack it in 75 years. So I don't know when we'll crack it, but in that meantime, the entire onus and that entire weight is on the filmmaker's shoulders. And if a filmmaker cannot shoulder that weight, a filmmaker should not make an artistic film. All of this is up to the filmmaker at the end of the day. The film will go as far as the filmmaker wants to push it. Because it's very exhausting for a producer. Every stage requires a producer to fork out even more money. So a producer is very happy not doing more than 5 festivals. But a filmmaker has to keep pushing and explaining to the producer what is in it for them. So if at all a film like Ajji or a Bhosle, the real heroes are the producers, not the director. Because I am a selfish director. I want my film to go to 100 festivals. But can a producer have the stamina and the financial, the pockets to really fund that journey? Because none of these producers are sitting on 100 crores. If they were, they wouldn't be making a Bhosle. They're putting money from their own pocket, their own savings they're putting in these films. Can they make 5 Bhosles a year? No. They can make maybe 1 every 5 years. So we are up against all kinds of challenges because we don't have the ecosystem. Those overall universally seeked kinds of films in festivals changes every 5 years. Like I said, you see the winners in the 90s, they'll be very different from the winners in the early 2000s. They'll be very different from the winners in the last 5 years, because every second country is being run by a fascist regime. No festival wants dark cinema. In a Busan, dark films are not winning, man. Hopeful, lighter films are winning awards. So if I had to look at that, I wouldn't be making Ajji and Bhosle. I had enough festivals turn down Bhosle. I cannot quote these festivals, but I have emails that tell me that we love your film, but it's a little too bleak for us to program. We don't know which section to program it in. So my films are getting turned down for being bleak. So I'm not making it because festivals want it. I'm making it despite festivals not wanting it. But till 10 years back, they wanted bleak films because life was a little optimistic, and Europe, especially Europe, white man Europe, is carrying a lot of guilt of colonization. So till 10 years back, they wanted to watch bleak films to sort of absolve themselves of guilt. To be fair to the festivals in the 50s, a lot of Indians accused Satyajit Ray of making poverty porn. Now, Satyajit Ray didn't intend to make poverty porn, but Europe wanted to reward poverty porn because they had just left a lot of countries that they had colonized. until then. So they were feeling good about giving awards to films that were about really poor people in countries that they had colonized. So Satyajit Ray just got lucky. He didn't plan to make poverty porn, but his films sort of filled the need for Europe to feel good about themselves. So you can't plan these things. You can just hope that you're making what you want to make, and somebody out there will want what you want, what you're trying to make.
We can end our session here. Thank you so much, Devashish, for joining and giving your insightful experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining. Thank you.
All the best to all of us, man.